Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and the date today is Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024. That means it's the 114th day of ranking my favorite video games through each day of the year. Coming in at number 253 is Final Fantasy III. As with Final Fantasy II, I'm recording Final Fantasy III with the Pixel Remaster version of the game. My original experience with the game was via the Nintendo DS remake, which redid the whole game with 3D graphics. I think that version gave many of the characters some much needed, character, but something about the pixel art just feels right. Mechanically, the game took a lot of lessons from the first two titles and brought them together to get the best of both worlds. Importantly, it took the job system of the first game and greatly expanded it. Now you can change each character's job at any time. For newcomers to the franchise, jobs are the name for character classes in the Final Fantasy games that have them. They can be things like warriors, black mages, white mages, thieves, monks, etc. In Final Fantasy III, each character has their actual character level, but also separately a job level to become more proficient with various things related to that job. For example, a higher job level as a mage allows you to cast more powerful spells, and also more of them in general without resting, having a larger number of spell uses available. This entry doesn't use the MP system and instead has spell uses and levels, so you'll be able to more frequently cast weaker spells, but big and powerful spells are more precious. There's a lot of benefits to being able to swap jobs around whenever you want. The most obvious one is that you're not locked into your choices at the start of the game, but there's more nuance than that. It created opportunities for the game to throw varied challenges at the player. For example, there's a segment where you have to shrink your party to navigate some very tiny areas. While you're small, melee attacks do almost nothing, but spells are just as effective as they normally would be. Because of this, you'll want to swap your whole party over to being spellcasters. Over time, as you progress through the story of the game, you'll unlock even more jobs, some of which are pretty different, like Scholar, which has fairly middling stats, but can give lots of information regarding enemies, and also has a big boost to the items that they use. Others are closer to being strict upgrades from previous jobs, like Knight, which hits just as hard as Warrior, but has better defensive stats and can use limited amounts of white magic as well. As I described, the third game in the franchise has better mechanics than the first two, so how is it that Final Fantasy I is, as you can probably guess from the trajectory of the channel, ranked higher than Final Fantasy III? Well, that largely comes down to the story. I'll talk about the first game when I get to it later this year, but for this one, save for a couple of interesting twists, the plot is just kinda forgettable. This ranking is technically based on the DS version, which somehow has actual story differences. The core plot is the same, but there's a lot more sequences with individual character interactions that the original did not have, and apparently neither does the Pixel Remaster. Your party is just there, and any talking by the party is just sort of done. From who? Doesn't matter, just the party. In fact, the characterization is so unimportant in the original format that in Pixel Remaster, you just name the characters whatever you want. I wound up using the randomize button, but they didn't even bother keeping the original names for all of the characters. The quality of life changes still have me saying that the Pixel Remaster is the best way to play this game, but if the lack of characterization is going to be an issue for you, in immersion or in anything else, go with the DS version or any of its ports. What is consistent across the writing, however, is how absolutely off-the-walls goofy it is. People frequently run up to you without warning and just tell you important info, then up and book it. That sequence with making yourself tiny? You have to be small to take a shortcut through a gnome village, then go up the nose of a serpent statue and beat a rat that stole a gem. Like, not even a special rat, it's just a rat. I mean, technically, yes, a giant rat, but still a rat, like it's not magical or anything. And then, after you make yourself normal again, you almost immediately have to turn yourself into frogs to sneak through a frog hole? And have I mentioned Michael Dwarfson? Final Fantasy III is the most unhinged game in the franchise, and I'm here for it. I've mentioned the Pixel Remaster quality of life changes in passing, and I went into them in more depth when I ranked Final Fantasy II at number 310, but the short version is that you get the option for orchestral score music, including the ability to just listen to it and take in Imatsu's genius, and the ability to turn off random encounters, and a full art gallery so that you can browse all of the concept art from Yoshitaka Amano. There's also an auto battle button that just keeps using the last abilities you had manually selected for each character to help speed up grinding for leveling. The expansion of the job system is Final Fantasy III's greatest contribution to the franchise, and while others have more bells and whistles, the distinct lines between many of the jobs helps from feeling overwhelming or confusing. In fact, I think Final Fantasy III is the best recommendation to make to someone who wants to experience the Nintendo-era titles as a first entry, since it has so many concepts the franchise keeps returning to, while also having a relatively forgiving difficulty curve and more dynamic combat compared to, say, the first game. Join me tomorrow as I talk about the 252nd game on my list, where I may or may not be dead, but at least I'm cute.